All right. We have found for you a pivotal game 3 between Grixis Death Shadow and Frenzy Affinity. That is classic Affinity. Not so much with the Affinity cards, but classic Affinity, so called, with Experimental Frenzy for some late game push.
Experimental Frenzy, a relatively recent addition. A little under a year ago, but definitely a big one.
Yeah, I don't think all Affinity lists are running it, but certainly some have tried. 4-drop's a little heavy, but the Affinity deck is really characteristically short on late game push, and
Yeah,
Frenzy can give you that.
and with so many 0 mana artifacts in the deck, Experimental Frenzy threatens to play a huge amount of cards every single turn, especially in post-board games that are super grindy with lots of discard and counter magic.
Yeah, so Kieran's going to take a mulligan here down to 6. Not really what you want to be doing on Affinity. Not a deck that creates a ton of card advantage, and so going down is not ideal.
Yeah, every mulligan with Affinity will hurt you a lot more than most decks in Modern.
Yeah. Even with that sweet, sweet London mulligan, when you're critical mass, you're not really benefiting as much. So Grixis Death Shadow is back.
Oh boy.
It was gone for a while when it was getting just completely hounded out of the meta.
Who's getting gacked, as they say?
Just gacked straight out of town. But it is back now. And I love this deck. It's got so much interesting play. We're going to see Bloodstained Mire pass. Ornithopter, so classic. Signal Pest. We're going to 19 on that fetch. Well, actually, that's fair. So, Death Shadow players, really about punching themselves in the face. When facing very fast aggro decks, really just need to let the aggro deck do it for them.
Yeah, it's definitely contextual based on how much damage you're staring down.
Yes. The other strategy that aggressive decks can take against Death Shadow is to not attack them.
Yeah, building up a big battlefield to kill them over the course of 1 or 2 turns is pretty good when you could otherwise be facing a strong counterattack.
Yes. Basically, you put the Death Shadow player in a bind if they can't damage themselves enough to really build up their threats, but you aren't doing the work for them. You're just setting up to, like, as soon as they have done enough to really present threats, you just kill them.
Yeah, and cards like Artbound Ravager are very good at doing that too. Ravager threatens a ton of damage from out of nowhere that's very difficult to deal with.
Absolutely, and especially with the prevalence of flyers in the Affinity deck, there's not anything in Death Shadow that can block flyers. They do have removal, so if you go all in, you better be sure that you didn't just sack your entire board for nothing.
Yeah, they have Fatal Push will usually protect you for at least a turn, depending on the board state.
Yeah, and if you go for the throat, that can be pretty bad. Sounds like Parker actually does. Yes, we see Parker holding a Fatal Push, and I believe in a braid.
And so this matchup is very much about that sort of fine dance between the Affinity player trying to build up enough pressure to kill the Death Shadow player, whereas the Death Shadow player needs to manage their removal spells to make sure that they always have one, but that they're not being overwhelmed by the board state.
Okay, we're going to get aggressive here and straight push the Ravager, which is going to allow Kieran to stack up his counters on something else, but he is rather intelligently not going too all in on that because there isn't a braid in play and Kieran is ready for a follow-up removal spell.
Yeah, no real reason to go for it. There's not really a big advantage to turning your lands and threats into +1/+1 counters at this state.
Yeah. Grixis Death Shadow much more about the 1-for-1ing, and so maintaining a high number of threats is more important than going tall.
So what do you think about the decision to put the modular counter on the Signal Pest as opposed to the Ornithopter?
I think it's fine. It actually diversifies you a little bit, so the battle cry is going to boost the Ornithopter. Actually, now I don't like it, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Because now he knocks out the Signal Pest, and that knocks out 2 points of damage instead of 1. So you're absolutely right. Taking out the Ornithopter, or putting the counter on the Ornithopter would have diversified the power on the board. So we're going to see a flipped Jace Vryn's Prodigy here into Jace.
Jace Telepath Unbound.
Thank you. I was about to say Wielder of Mysteries, and that is incorrect. I was like, what's this one? It's allows you to cast
Yeah, so
instants and sorceries from your graveyard.
the -3 is effectively flashing back, although with slightly different wording. The +1 is to give a creature -2/-2/0, -2/-0 until your next turn.
So here we go. We have found a cranial plating for Kieran, and that's going to mean a lot of damage.
Yeah, I'm at 14.
This is an attack for what? I'm a little confused about that.
That was an attack for 1.
Why is it an attack for 1?
Because of the Jace's -2/-0 effect.
Oh, of course. You can see I know everything about Jace. Telepathic about.
It goes really well with Mox Opal decks, you know.
Yeah, I've played a ton of this card. All right. We're having
Hey,
a
Birdimus,
think.
thanks for joining us.
Hey, Bird. It's good to see you, buddy. What do we got?
And so this flip Jace is pretty bad news for the Frenzy Affinity deck. Getting to flashback cards like a Braid and Fatal Push is really not going to end well for them.
However, Jace can target one threat. He can't target the Inkmoth Nexus. And so if Kieran activates Inkmoth Nexus, moves Cranial Plating, he can start hitting for a lot of poison really quickly, and that will allow him to present a threat that does not lower Parker's life total.
That is definitely worth noting. Yeah, Inkmoth Nexus is pretty good against the Death Shadow deck sometimes. Also worth noting that Parker elected not to flashback the Abrade on the plating that turn, so he probably has something like a Kolaghan's Command in hand.
Yes. That would be a good read.
Ooh,
So
Aether Grid's a nice one.
Yeah, that's good.
we're going to go with Ether Grid here.
Combat. Yeah. Yeah, he's at 6.
Jace takes 1. We're going to hold off the storm there. And we are holding up 1 activation of Gear per Ether Grid, which will allow a Lava Dart. 1/2.
Ping ping.
Ping, ping.
Aether Grid, definitely a nice card in the matchup. Hard to remove, hard to interact with.
Yeah, does not fall victim to all of the artifact hate that GDS has available. They notably do not have a ton of enchantment hate.
It also makes it harder to safely go to a low life total. Just the threat of end step, dealing a few damage, untap, dealing a few more damage.
Yes.
Yeah.
You better be ready to win the game.
Yeah, looks good.
Oh, look at that opal.
Yeah.
Ugh. Beautiful. Shiny.
Perfection.
Love it.
Animate.
Animate Inkmoth Nexus.
One Jace. One Jace.
So I like the decision to just fire off the pings
Yeah.
instead of trying to go for combat damage.
Yeah, let's just kill him.
Oh.
Let's just kill
Okay.
Jace.
Gotcha. Okay. Not attacking. Yeah. No combat.
Not an attack, just a shock.
Pass turn. Go to end step. And I'll go to 13.
All right. Parker's still very conservative with his fetch lands here. He's just going to take 1.
In a
Grab a
situation like
basic.
this, I think that's probably the right choice.
Yeah, he's looking at, as far as damage goes, if we activate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 artifacts currently available. So 2 damage. Kieran plays. Oh, we're going to
Painful cost.
dismember the Inkmoth. Full freight. No cheating.
Move to my turn.
None of that Phyrexian mana skipping on mana total.
So that's going to make it harder for Kieran to come up with
Yeah.
3 damage a turn off the Ether Grid, which I think is still too slow. Well, he's at 20, so I don't hate it.
Yeah.
He
And
could be
this
dead to TBR, but who isn't dead to TBR?
Go ahead.
TBR is berserk, but in a
Ugh.
modern day.
I'm at 13. Or I'm at 12, sorry. Yeah.
Kieran pings for 1.
Interesting to see he chose not to do a double ping there with the Blinkmoth Nexus.
Yeah, he could have activated and gone ahead and done that.
Yeah, looks good. Move to combat. Yeah, attack first.
All right, we're actually just going to straight attack for 1 here.
I will. Yeah, that's it. Cool. Sounds good. Move to pass.
Now we're looking at
Upkeep.
a shock at end of turn, presumably. Notably,
Yeah, I'm at.
okay, we're not activating the other Blinkmoth Nexus for that extra point of damage, which I find interesting. I don't know what
Yeah,
Kieran
like-
exactly has in mind, but
I think he's just missing that. You can.
it's possible. So we're going to get in the air,
Sounds good.
and then we're going to
So we're looking at a bit of a slow death here. Parker's really not drawing much.
No. If he had a
Past you. 24. Yeah. 7.
yeah, if he had a shadow, he'd have slammed it by now. It's not vulnerable to the Ether Grid.
Yeah, and this is one of the big weaknesses to the Death Shadow deck. You are very threat light, so there are plenty of games where you disrupt them a bunch, but you can't find a way to close out the game.
Yep, and so that is time and round being called. So we are going to have 5 more turns available here. Parker going to 6. Can we finish him off? I'm going to guess yes. See, we're going to do turn. We're going to do 2 and end a turn, take him to 4, untap. If he attacks with both Blink Moth, then we'll take him to 2. Yeah. I believe Kieran has this unless Parker has an answer to the Ether Grid. That is not an answer to the Ether Grid. That's a 5/5. Kieran at 20. Not going to do it.
However,
And
with the
take 2.
Teamer Battle Rage in hand, Parker
He's not going to
might-
get another turn. Oh, what do we got?
Ooh.
Oh!
Bang bang.
Hurkyl's Recall, return all your artifacts to hand. Wait a minute, let me have this Metalcraft. Take 4. Bam. Finishing it off. Kieran going to take this match down with Affinity against GDS.
An explosive end.
Boom.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff that
So we went to time here. And so we don't have a ton of time. What else do we want to talk about for a second? We talked about, there were some discussions of Stoneforge Mystic going on in chat, a pretty in-depth discussion.
Yeah, Stoneforge Mystic, definitely an interesting card. A lot of people have been on the fence for a while as to whether or not it would be a safe unban. So it looks like WotC has decided to take the plunge. And one interesting thing is that Stoneforge Mystic kind of intrinsically rewards you for playing more creatures. Because usually you want to include at least 1 or 2 sort of blank and blank in your deck, like sort of fire and ice. And when you have cards like that in your deck, you're incentivized to run more creatures. Another interesting thing is that the planeswalkers that have recently been printed, like Narset Parter Veils to Fairy Time Raveler, very strong cards that also reward you for playing creatures to pressure them. So I think that Modern is going to change quite a bit since this time last year. Just from a conceptual level. As far as the card in the metagame, it's already been putting up some decent results. Nobody can really agree what the best list is. I've seen White-Black Stoneblade do well, I've seen Jeskai, I've seen Esper, just straight up blue-white, so lots of different ways to go around it. And
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. How has Stoneforge impacted the meta Guardian Gates? A lot of people are trying it in a lot of diverse ways. There have been mono-white Taxes decks, green-white Taxes decks, that is decks with Thalia, Leonin Arbiter, general hate cards in white.
And I just wanted to give a shout out to Nuglo. Thank you for the subscription. Thank you for all the entertainment the team produces. And we're glad to have you, man. We're very glad to have you.
Yeah, I also saw Bogdan earlier, subscribed, and I want to send you a thank you. Bogdan, you are great. We see you here every week, and it's really awesome to see you. Actually, in general, everyone in chat who we see on a weekly basis, it's awesome. I really like the fact that y'all show up and you see each other, you see us, and it means a lot.
Yeah, it's
Beyond the subscription.
It's super nice to have a regular play base. Some cool people you can see every week.
Yeah. So, Stoneforge Mystic, definitely pushing the mid-range games in Modern. We'll see where it settles. I know it's sort of a provisional unban, and you know they could ban it again if it becomes broken. But so far, I'm not really seeing that. It could be because no one's found the build for it, but it's also just a slower card than Modern is used to.
Yeah, it's a little bit. You definitely have to support it with other cards. You can't just expect Stoneforge Mystic alone to go the distance against most Modern decks.
Yes.
So we're really seeing it paired up quite a bit with blue and black. The discard spells like Inquisition to Kozilek, and the counter spells like Force of Negation doing a lot of work to reinforce your Stoneforge Mystic.
Yeah, it is very vulnerable to removal, especially if you're grabbing, you know, a Batter Skull. You really don't want that thing to get pushed.
Yeah, you really have to be conscious about the odds of your Stoneforge living when it comes to what you're grabbing.
Yeah, you can definitely put yourself in a bad position making that mistake.
But Having said that, it is a powerful card. It has seen play, and it will continue to see play. I'm almost sure of it.
So have we seen any Eldraine spoilers? So we talked about it a little bit earlier. We can come back to it, maybe. But we are about to get ready for round number 3 here. So we're going to take a quick break and come back with another match.